Well, hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Ultra Talk podcast. I'm in the studio, of course, here in Montreal, a studio I had already visited about 2 years ago with Henri Do, who interviewed me in these very studios. I'd like to take this opportunity to say hello to him. Today I'm with a local cyclist who is making a name for himself internationally. This is Henri Do. Hi, Henri?
Hi, Bernard.
I'm happy finally. Well, I say finally, because you're probably one of the guests I've been talking with the longest to try and set up a conversation. And it was great to take advantage of this opportunity and my visit to Montreal for the RACE ACROSS QUEBEC bike show. To be able to do it here in these comfortable studios, to learn about your journey and to introduce your story to French speakers on the other side of the Atlantic. So I'm happy to meet you. Welcome to Ultra Talk. And the first question I'm going to ask you, Henri, is can you introduce yourself to the listeners of the podcast?
Certainly. My name is Henri Do. I have been an ultra cyclist for now 7 years, you could say, since the pandemic. Before that, I did triathlons. I did triathlons for 4 or 5 years, Ironman races. Then I realized that Ironman races weren't really what I enjoyed doing. Running during a triathlon, I would run in my training once a month. I would swim the day before the race. And I would bike the rest of the time. So it was pretty much like that. 88% biking, 1.5% running, and 0.5% swimming. I still had good times, but cycling was definitely my strength. So that's when, after 50 kilometers, it's kind of like still Ironman level. I told myself I'm going to focus on more cycling, on bikepacking. But then, in the end, bikepacking wasn't challenging enough for my limits. So that's when I started doing ultras on a whim. And now I do them every weekend or every other week. And your winters?
Yes. So let's talk about your achievements, as they say. So it's true that Henri has done some resting. By the way, I invite you to follow him on social media, especially Instagram. It's Henki, right? Henki. So I encourage you to subscribe to his Instagram account and follow what he's doing. And also on Linktree, you'll be able to see his exploits. Because it's true that he does a lot of things. He rides a lot, and especially in sub-zero temperatures. That doesn't scare him at all. Even coming to the studio, Henri tells me, right now it's -3 as we're speaking. And Henri tells me, I actually prefer it when it's how many degrees but below zero. When it's -10 because the road is drier. So there you go. And just recently you did a Montreal, New York. I followed you. It was in December, I think, during the festive 500. You're going to tell us about it. But what I love, Henri, is that we're going to talk about the Trans-Canada bike, 12,500 or 12,000 kilometers, huge, that you took part in. There were the Everesting challenges I mentioned, and there were also other things. We'll talk about them. But if we rewind a little, Henri, where are you from and what was your relationship with sports as a kid, as a child?
So actually, I was born in Brassens, which is south of Montreal. When I was young, I hated biking. I hated sports. I was actually a Nintendo kid, so I preferred being indoors playing Nintendo or on the computer. And in the end, the family weekend outing was my mom forcing me to go biking. So we would go on little bike rides on my red tricycle that I had. Then with my family, so my dad, my mom, my sister, and my brother, one of our family outings was to go to the old port of Montreal. So that's quite a trek for someone who's 4 or 5 years old. It was a good 30 kilometers, and we did that every weekend. So we would go to the old port, eat in Chinatown, and then head back home. And then eventually, after being forced to ride bikes so much,
you started to like it.
I started to enjoy it later on, but really much later in life. Because from the age of 4 up until I was about 15 or 16, I hated it.
That's what I was going to say. As a teenager and all that, you weren't, like you said, you were a gamer. You didn't have a license. You weren't registered. There were no competitions.
Exactly.
It really wasn't your thing.
No, I liked going fast on the bike. I liked pedaling.
Fast.
Because that's what I learned to do when I was young. But after that, just cycling, doing sports, that really wasn't my thing at all. I preferred gaming. I was really into World of Warcraft, for example, into Diablo, all the games that all the young people of that time, they know them just as well.
It's quite interesting for all the parents who have kids that aren't athletic, who avoid sports when they're young, to see that this can change in life, that it can evolve, that at some point you can do long distances and enjoy it and get into sports. Today, it's a lifestyle with a mindset that's really focused on that. Like you said, you do it almost every weekend. But the question I could ask is, you were just explaining how it happened. After the pandemic, meaning, was there a turning point for you during the pandemic? where you said to yourself, in the end, I want more adventure. I want to go even further than an Ironman?
Actually, it started before the pandemic. So the pandemic was kind of, let's say, an extra catalyst that pushed my limits even further. Because ultras, I started that the year before the pandemic. So just a few months before the pandemic happened. And then I developed a taste for doing ultra endurance events. So I told myself, driving a car, let's be honest, it's long, it's boring. So I get to all my events by bike. So if I had an event, a ride in Estrie from Montreal, I would commute there by bike. So 100 kilometers of commuting. I would do the 100-kilometer ride and then return to Montreal the same day. So 300 kilometers just to do the event in Estrie, actually. After that, it was finally, I still had several marathons to complete because I was in my smooth transition between triathlon competitions and
cycling.
I still had races and marathons I was registered for, including one in Toronto. So in the end, I told myself, but driving from Montreal to Toronto takes about 5 to 6 hours. Alone, it's boring, it's long. Maybe I could get to Toronto by bike in 2 days, bike packing style. That's still 2 days of about 300 kilometers each, more or less. Doing it in 2 days, running the marathon, and then coming back, it's much more enjoyable. It's much more...
That I have no doubt that it's
enjoyable.
I have no doubt about it. But now I'm thinking in terms of muscles. That is, when you ride 300 kilometers by bike the day before running a marathon, I think that everyone listening to us who has already run a marathon is probably thinking, wait, if I had done 300 kilometers the day before, how would that have gone? So how does it actually go? What is your reference time for a marathon? And for the marathon you're talking about, how did it go after riding 300 kilometers the day before?
It's true that I'm not a runner by nature. Like I said earlier, I run on average once a month, once every 2 weeks at most. So that's my reference time for a marathon, all things considered. Despite what I do, I still have a pretty decent time, I think. My reference time is 3 hours and 40 minutes for a marathon. That marathon, after the 600 kilometers from Marana to Toronto, I didn't finish it in under 4 hours. If I remember correctly, 4.5 hours, 4:45. You have all my respect. That wasn't my time. Actually, the goal wasn't the time. It was really about the adventure. We weren't going to just take the car. We were going to do everything by bike. The mindset behind that is more, well, how can I train my body to always be tired, but also to be efficient while tired, because an ultra takes several days. I don't want our bodies to eventually become completely consumed by fatigue.
So
how can we teach it how to learn to consistently perform at its best, even when we're tired, even when we're down at -10 energy, or even -100 energy?
And that's the question you asked yourself. And did you find any answers to that? That must interest a lot of people. How do you make sure your body is always moving? And I don't know if I can say performing, but at least at a good level when you're on a long distance adventure. What are the keys for you? What tips can you share with all the experience you have, and which we'll get into in a moment?
You see, as human beings, we have this machine, a body that's truly remarkable in the sense that we adapt very quickly and we adapt to everything. So human beings themselves, the human race, we've been adapting for years and years and years. And it's the same for an ultra, for a race. If we put ourselves in a position where we have to adapt, our body will manage it and it will do it. So we just have to trust ourselves that our body can do it. And the more you trust yourself and the more you give yourself the chance, everything comes down to your mindset. So if right from the start we tell ourselves, no, we're putting obstacles in our own way, even just by thinking about it, it doesn't help us. So we just need to be open to the idea that it's possible, that we can adapt, that we'll get there, and the body will naturally follow.
I agree with you about the mindset. Those aren't the exact words you just used, but it's exactly the same meaning. It's about saying, trust yourself. It probably won't go the way you imagined, but that's okay. You have the experience, the resources, and you'll know how to find solutions. And it's true that when you have that mindset, I would say that when you set out, like you said, I have 600 kilometers to cover. I'm going to do it in 2.5 days by bike. You savor the adventure differently because you know that no matter what happens, it's not a big deal. You'll know how to find the resources that will allow you to keep moving forward. I'd also like us to touch on another aspect before we get back to how you discovered ultra and then the adventures you set for yourself afterwards. What is your profession, Henri? There's a big part of your life, of course, that's taken up by ultra-distance sports. We know that when you do endurance sports, not just cycling, but endurance sports in general, it takes a lot of time. What is your job today?
Yes, so What I do in my everyday life is actually the complete opposite of what I do on the bike. I work in an office, so I work in IT. I'm a pre-implementation consultant in business intelligence, so I handle a lot of IT projects for my company.
What do you mean by IT?
Everything related to databases, automation, and also optimization. So that's kind of what I bring into cycling as well, because what I want is optimization. It's about optimizing everything we do in day-to-day life, whether it's in a database, in reports, on the bike, or especially during an ultra. If it's a multi-day ultra, we can optimize everything we do during an ultra. Let's say every day, I know I have a 5,000 kilometer race, and every day I need to sleep. If every day it takes me 10 extra minutes to unpack and repack my gear, that's 10 minutes times the number of days. That adds up to hours. It's huge. So if I can optimize and save 30 seconds here and 30 seconds there, it's a no-brainer. All these little things add up, and in the end, over a 5,000 kilometer race spanning several days, it amounts to hours.
So you managed to transfer, let's say, the tips or experience you've gained between your professional life and your passion for ultra-distance events.
Yes, exactly.
You make those kinds of transfers between disciplines. That's interesting. That's interesting. And today, since you have a very, very serious job, how are you supported? Because it's true that in our discipline, ultra distance, we're about 10 to 15 years behind what trail running is doing. So having professional athletes, we don't have any today, whether in Europe, in France, or here in North America. But how do you yourself collaborate with your partners? Since you're well supported by brands, you mentioned recently that some of your partner brands are restructuring, giving you less visibility for 2026 than usual. But well, I have no doubt that things will fall into place. But how do you collaborate with your brands? Are you the one who reaches out to them? Or is it them who come to you because of the content you produce and above all, the incredible adventures you have? How does that part work exactly?
Actually, you see, with most of my brands, almost all of them, it's more often them who have approached me. Personally, I hate everything that has to do with paperwork, emails, exchanges, communication. I'd rather spend my time riding my bike. Already, doing ultras takes time, so I prefer just riding. That's it. Anything that's paperwork or logistics is really something I hate doing, so I try to put it off as long as possible. And at the same time, I tell myself that if brands approach me, it's because they want to have me. So for me, what's most important is the close relationship, the ability to communicate, to collaborate, and to really talk together. That means much more than me approaching a brand that doesn't want anything from me, but just wants a monetary or contractual exchange. I prefer a relationship that's authentic over money.
Because you have some great brands. If you want, you can name them, but you do have some great brands supporting you. These
aren't
brands where you would say, what is this brand? No, you have brands where when you see them, you immediately think, oh yeah, that speaks for itself. It's quality. These are quality products. So it's totally understandable. So the brand you've collaborated with the longest?
Arc'teryx. So Arc'teryx, actually, it's really even that before with Arc'teryx, Arc'teryx isn't a cycling brand. It's a brand for adventure, hiking, trail running, trekking, whatever.
For being outdoors?
That's it, for being outdoors. And actually, the way I discovered Arc'teryx was because there was a photo contest. And also, before that, I did a lot of winter hiking. On a whim, of course. So that's kind of how I started to learn to love winter. I did hikes in the Adirondacks. There's something called the 46 mountains in the Adirondacks. So it's the 46 highest peaks over 4,000 feet. And generally, people take several years to climb them all. They climb them in the summer and more or less in the winter. And it's a challenge that exists. So it's a challenge to be able to climb all 46 peaks and to document it. And once that's done, you can send it to the organization in charge of the mountains in the Adirondacks to be officially recognized as a 46er, meaning you've climbed all 46 peaks. You can do it in summer or in winter. Eventually, that year, 2019, right when COVID hit, the first time I went hiking, I started my first hike wearing Sorel boots and a flannel shirt. The following week, I got myself properly equipped. Then a few days later, I decided maybe I could do all 46 peaks in a single winter. What? Not really for me anymore? People usually take 5 or 6 years, even 10 years to do it. And people usually do it in summer, not in winter. In the end, I actually did it every single week. I planned out hikes to figure out what was the most optimal, to get the most sleep, cover the least distance, and have the least elevation gain.
We optimized everything.
That's right. I would leave at 6 in the morning. I'd do a 40-kilometer hike with about 2,000 to 3,000 meters of elevation gain. I'd come back the same day. That was pretty much every weekend, so I'd go off on adventures by myself. And
that's how Arcturus got in touch with you. During that period?
I connected with them, Arcturus specifically, after climbing 46 winter summits in a single season.
Of course, for them it's great to have someone like that who can test the gear, really put it to the test, and give feedback on what they've used, especially in sub-zero temperatures. In any case, we were lucky enough to meet the team last summer at RACE ACROSS QUEBEC, where the Arc'teryx team was present. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them because they brought us a little bit of gear. And honestly, the volunteers really appreciated it. So a big thank you to them. I thought it gave a really, really good image of the brand. We didn't ask for anything and we weren't expecting it. The team came, was super enthusiastic and gave us some really, really nice caps. So a big thank you to them. And at what point, Henri Do, you realized that ultra running was going to become an important part of your life? Could you tell us the moment, the instant, the race, the event, the setting, the emotions, when you said to yourself, this is where I feel good doing what I'm doing, this is where I feel good, and I sense that this is going to become a big part of my life in the years to come?
You see, I actually started doing ultras more as a joke in the sense that...
But it's funny that you say that because you've mentioned several times that you did it on a whim, even though you have a very serious job. You explained that you study everything to optimize the time between transitions, that you actually transfer what you've learned from ultras to your job to save time.
Those are two extremes.
When we listen to your approach, we think this guy, everything is calculated, it's all planned out, there's no room for chance. But actually, no, you've said several times, I did this on a whim, I got into ultras on a whim. Explain this contradiction to us.
It depends on what, because actually for a race itself, yes, the general mindset isn't calculated. So you have to be flexible, you have to be adaptable. The greatest strength we can have is being able to adapt to the changes that happen in front of us because everything is always changing. We can have a plan, but it's rare that the plan goes as expected. Especially in an ultra, it's extremely rare. So the greatest strength is what we do when an obstacle appears in front of us so we can tackle that obstacle. Reframe it, then keep moving forward. And keep figuring out how I can get to the next step, the next objective, so I can reach the final goal after that. But anyway, aside from that, it's true that all my challenges, actually all my adventures, were often on a whim. Because before, when we ask ourselves questions, is something possible? When you haven't done it, you often tell yourself, no, it's impossible. Also, the community, society has this kind of preconception about what is possible and what isn't. And often people actually kind of go along with that. So at the beginning of my ultras, when I started doing my first long distance race, I didn't know if it was possible or not. But actually the difference is that I gave myself the chance to try. So really giving yourself the chance to say yes or to try and then to start. Because if we live our lives always telling ourselves, no, it's not possible, no, I can't do it, we'll never progress, we'll never move forward. So at the very least, we just need to tell ourselves maybe. And that's when we learn about ourselves. It changes everything.
It opens the door, at least. It effectively opens up the doorway to the possibility that everything could potentially go well, or that the desired goal can finally be achieved.
That's it.
So it's a good mindset. Then what, in your opinion, has transformed you the most, or where have you evolved the most? That is to say, if I rewind and bring today's Henri back to 5 years ago, how do you think he has changed? What has ultra running... What are the character traits that you have changed the most? Adaptability, maybe? You mentioned it. Indeed, in ultra running, when you start out, you have a strategy, you have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and in the end, you end up on plan Z because so many things happen that you didn't expect. But what has shifted things the most?
Yes, you see, that's it. The thing is, before, I used to think that certain things were impossible, but by doing things I thought were impossible, that's when I realized that in the end, nothing is impossible. Everything is possible, and even if we don't succeed the way we want, it's still a story we're writing, describing, and living. And the story itself is the reality of what we've experienced, and it's the experience we've gained. So now, when I have an idea in mind that might seem completely crazy, I tell myself, okay, how do I start? That's really it. Instead of saying, okay.
The first step, that's
not really the question. A lot of people will ask themselves, am I capable of doing it? The answer is always yes. You just have to allow yourself to do it. After that, we have a threshold, we have a comfort zone. Your comfort zone, that's what will hold you back and limit you. We can be afraid of something. We can be afraid to do something, but we shouldn't let fear stop us or limit us in this. So that's what I learned. I learned that fear is normal. We're human. It's a feeling, it's an emotion. But after that, being afraid is just being afraid. After that, what do you do with fear? Do you let your fear control you, or do you accept the fear? And no matter what, you also find a solution. But how do I start?
No. I completely agree with what you're saying. I understand perfectly. And it also allows me to see how you built your experience, your professional journey, your personal journey. And when it comes to long distance events, Henri, I follow you on social media, and it's true that you still take on these challenges. Even this winter in Montreal, New York, it wasn't 25 degrees. You can tell you're drawn to these challenges in the cold. When it's cold, we often see you out there. In any case, the cold, I don't know if it's something you actually like, but at the very least, it doesn't scare you. It doesn't stop you. It's not because it's minus 15 degrees that you won't go out and do it. 50 kilometers, 500 kilometers. It doesn't bother you at all. I have a question about solitude because I used to be, but I'm not anymore. But I used to be an ultra cyclist, so I spent many hours and days riding alone, and people often ask me about it. Yeah, but you're alone, solitude, how do you deal with it? So that's what I'm asking you now. Henri, how do you handle it? Those long straight roads, those long moments of solitude, crossing through hours, do you just let yourself get carried away by the flow and drift off? And at some point you come back to your senses and you don't even remember the 40 kilometers you just rode. Do you listen to music? Do you listen to podcasts? How do you deal with solitude?
You see, an ultra ride is long. It can seem very sad. Like you said, there's a lot of solitude in the fact that we're alone. But for me, it's a moment to meditate. It's a time for me to find myself, to be outside, to breathe the air. One of the main reasons I do ultras, that I ride at night, do 24-hour rides non-stop, that I cover such long distances, is to see beautiful landscapes. So sunrises, sunsets, the stars at night under a clear sky, for me it's magical.
It's truly stunning.
It brings you back to life. It makes you imagine things. It makes you feel alive. It's so beautiful that for me, it's the ultimate reward. It
wipes away all the difficulties.
That's it.
Yes, I understand.
When I ride an ultra, I don't even think about the distance. I really think about Quebec. What's the goal? I'm heading to New York. I'm going to see the Statue of Liberty. I'm going to see the
stars. You know, when you did that challenge, it's funny because when you did your challenge, I talked to my partner about it. I told her, the guy, he went to New York by bike. It just so happened that this summer, right before WC Quebec, I took the opportunity to take my kids and my partner to Montreal to show them Montreal. And since it's not very, very far, because you did it by bike, we thought it's not very, very far. What you need to know is that by car, it takes 6 hours. It takes 6 hours. And generally, when I have a distance like that, I tell myself that by bike, you have to multiply by at least 3. You see, you have to multiply by at least 3. How long did it take you to get to New York? It was
much longer than expected. There was black ice, so ice, a snowstorm, so I wasn't even counting anymore. But initially I was planning on 28, 34 hours, considering that I told myself that once I left Montreal, in theory, the further south you go, the warmer it gets and the less snow there is. I thought it should be quick once I left the Adirondacks. But in the end, it was the opposite. It is actually quite the opposite. I quite literally brought this entire storm with me from Montreal. And
so to get back to the topic, I was wondering, because I brought my kids along to discover New York, this beautiful city. Yes, we felt safer than ever before. Honestly, it's a city we truly loved. And we found that going there by car was extraordinary. Because when you arrive by car, you see Manhattan. And I think that by bike, it must be even more impressive. You know, arriving by bike, coming from Montreal and entering from the north of the state, you arrive from the north of New York, the north of Manhattan, and you see the buildings taking shape. So it's not your first time, you're used to it, but the first time you did it, what were your feelings about it?
Well, you see, everything is amplified when you're on a bike. So just like in a car, you're amazed when you arrive in New York, but on a bike, it's even more so. You know, it's completely crazy, but at a slower pace. So it's like being in slow motion.
Yes.
That's what's great about it. But actually, when you arrive in New York, you realize that after all that time, you finally get there. And in fact, after riding for so long, you finally reach your destination. There's kind of a what's next, but at the same time, it's also
I did it, you know? Yes.
there's a what's next, but at the same time, you also realize that the world, even though it's a huge planet Earth that can seem enormous with thousands and millions of inhabitants, at the same time, we're so interconnected, and it's so fascinating that we can link big cities like that just with the strength of our legs.
That's true. I completely agree. And also in New York, because I know you arrived in front of the Rafa Clubhouse in New York, you can ride, you probably use the bike lanes along the Hudson. Honestly, I actually rented a bike from Rafa. I went riding in Central Park. I used the bike lanes. You're safe. You're protected. I even did another webinar last week with Elsa Lagach, who lives in New York, and confirmed that you can absolutely ride safely. And the other question I could ask you is, how do you cross the border? Because you go by car. I won't get into the political subject of the United States. Don't count on me for that. I won't get into that subject. In any case, when I went there by car with my kids, we were stopped for an hour and a half because you have to get out of the car, leave your keys with someone, and go into another building where you get photographed and checked. Meanwhile, they search your car with dogs to make sure there's nothing in it. And that takes about an hour and a half, then you leave. For you on a bike, did you have the same process when you arrived at the border? How did it go?
You see, it's still, I think they know me at this point because I cross the border so often.
When they see a guy arriving on a bike, they must be thinking,
in my opinion, there's probably something on the staff bulletin board, like, watch out, there's a cyclist coming through or something like that, because
they see you coming from far away, if you know what I mean. It's
still pretty quick, actually. Anyway, it's the same questions. We cross over. Are you bringing anything? What are you going to do? How long are you staying? And often, of course, when do you plan to get there? And that's when I tell them, I intend to make it to New York in 24 hours, no matter what. It's
great because it must break the ice somehow.
Yes. And then after that, they often ask me, where are you going to sleep? And the answer is, I
do not
sleep. And I even intend not to sleep. The goal is, if I feel like sleeping, I'll stop. Maybe for an hour in a post office, on a picnic table, whatever, on the ground, by the side of the road. But what's interesting isn't sleeping.
It's good because it kind of breaks the ice a little. You see, because it's true that Americans, they have this tendency, is very process-oriented, even just arriving by plane at the border and all that. They're not there to be friendly. You know, it's it's direct, right? And so in this case, having that kind of interaction, seeing a guy show up in cycling gear, leaving from Montreal and arriving in New York, it must definitely catch their attention. And the human side probably comes out a little bit. So there you go. I was interested in hearing those answers, and I'd like you to tell us about the Trans-Canada. When I discovered this event, I saw that you had done it. I was like, wow. I mean, you really have to be incredibly brave and daring to set out on a 12,000 kilometer journey like that. Tell us about this race and why you decided to take on this challenge.
So you see, the Trans-Canada was also kind of a spur of the moment thing. It wasn't really...
You can't just start the Trans-Canada randomly.
Yes and no. In the sense that, yes, I had the idea beforehand. I knew I wanted to do it because I knew that, for me, one of my dreams was to cross the country by bike. And then I thought, normally when you cross Canada, it's from Vancouver to Halifax, so about 6,000 kilometers. But the Trans-Canada is something else. So you start from the Yukon, you go down from the Yukon to Vancouver. So right there, you're already adding another 4,000 kilometers. Then after that, from Halifax, you go all the way to Newfoundland. So basically to the end of the world, actually, the easternmost point of North America in Newfoundland. So that makes a total of 12,000 kilometers. This event, actually, it was a race, but it was an inaugural race. So I was the first person to do it, to complete it officially. And at the same time, I also had to open up the route because there were a lot of sections that were unknown since no one had ever actually ridden it before officially.
How do you scout out? 12,000 kilometers.
Yes.
That's it, just to explain.
So for me, this event actually, what I meant by a spur of the moment decision is that I knew I wanted to do it as an adventure. And yes, it was a race in quotation marks, really. I had 2 months of vacation, so I had to finish in 2 months. And according to my calculations, it was realistic. 12,000
km in 2 months. There are a lot of people who must be thinking that's not even what I do in a whole year. That I split over 2 years. So that's different because you're in adventure mode, but how long exactly did it take you to cover those 12,000 kilometers? 2 months?
60 days.
60 days.
So 60 days, but that also includes the fact that my bike broke during that race. I cracked my frame when I got to Newfoundland. So I had a crack in the frame and I managed to get it fixed, repaired by some boat builders in the area, because in the Maritimes there are a lot of fishermen. So there are a lot of boat builders, a lot of people who work with fiberglass, boat hulls and such. So I tried to get it fixed, but in the end it didn't work.
Exactly. That's a good idea.
I had to wait 10 days for my replacement frame to arrive. And also in that area, there's not really any network. There's not really any tracking as such. So the bike, once it was sent off, I had no idea where it was. So when my bike broke down near the end of the Trans-Canada, I still had about 1,000 kilometers left to ride. I was on a farm waiting every day. In the morning, I would get up and wait first to see if there was an extreme UPS truck coming by.
That must give you a completely different relationship with time, with yourself. And when you travel across the vast expanse of your own country, there are still places, I don't know if you can call them deserts, but there are immense empty stretches of land where there is absolutely no one to be found. There is no one per square kilometer. Did you have moments of fulfillment while watching a sunset, a sunrise? I invite you, if you're listening to this episode and you're in front of your computer, go on Google Maps, type in Canada, zoom out, and look at everything Henri crossed. There are the United States, which is 5,000, but Canada is even bigger, 12,000 kilometers. And Henri, he did all 12,000. And when you tell me that you would wait in the morning, you'd get up, you'd look to see if a UPS truck was coming or not, it just gives me the most incredible images. But I don't even know if you can really describe everything you experienced actually in 2 months.
You see, in what I want to do as well, as a cyclist, I still have a very artistic side, and I prefer the poetic aspect of an ultra challenge. So yes, ultras are about big numbers, it's superhuman, but for me there's also more of a poetic aspect in the sense that I document it. Everything I see, everything I experience, and everything I do, and I share them on social media because there are so many beautiful things like sunrises, sunsets, stars, and the northern lights. The animals I came across, the bears, whatever it was. So everything is documented like a logbook. And at the same time, it's also my safety net in the sense that if I stop documenting, people can see what's gone, what's still gone. Anyway, did you
ever get scared of the bears?
Yes, that's right, quite a lot.
Did you see any?
I did see some. You see.
So, I saw some and I was scared. So were you scared at the moment you saw them?
Actually, I was scared because the Trans-Canada, it started in the Yukon. And the Yukon, it's the bear capital of the world. Not black bears, but brown bears. Grizzly bears that are aggressive, that want to kill you, and not the other way around, who are afraid of you. So on my way to the Yukon, I had 3 or 4 days before the race officially started. The goal after that
was not to get eaten before the start.
Actually, no, it was to go see some bears. To go find some bears, because at that point in my life, I had never seen a bear before. I told myself I had 4 days. We'll head further north rather than south because the race goes south toward Vancouver. I'm going to go north, even closer to the bears, toward Alaska. In the end, I went searching, fishing, hunting for grizzly bears, and I found some. For me, it was really, I had never seen anything like that. What's the best thing to do to make yourself comfortable? It's to put yourself in that position, to go see the bears of Saint-Pauvier, to confront that even. Then, apparently for the Trans-Canada in the sense of spur-of-the-moment decision, is that before the Trans-Canada, I had never slept outside on a whim. I had never slept on a picnic table. I had never slept in a post office on the ground, by the side of the road. I had always planned everything, my hotels, my accommodations, but that's when I told myself if I want to do ultras later, Trans Am, TCR, whatever, I need to learn how to do this. And what's the best way to learn how to do this? It's to just do it, plain and simple.
That's
it. So in the end, the Yukon Trans-Canada, I had never slept on the ground, outside. There
were a lot of firsts.
Yes, absolutely.
You need to keep talking about the bear because I'm interested. It's going to interest the listeners too. So you encountered bears, but at what moment were you actually scared? Was it when you found yourself face to face and it started looking at you a bit sideways? How did that
happen? You know, I still had a preconceived idea of how the experience was going to be. And, you know, in thinking about it and reflecting with anxiety, you start making up stories, creating scenarios in your head.
Yes, exactly.
But then in the end, when it actually happened, I saw it from a distance. Because in the Yukon, it's vast land, so there isn't much vegetation, which means you can see very far. In the end, that morning, I did see a bear, actually, in the distance. It looked like a big stuffed animal. And I had already been told, okay, the things you can do when you see one, you stay put, you wait for it to pass or to leave. In the end, it just stood there.
Did you have any equipment with you, like bear spray or things like that?
Yes, I had bear spray, but for me it was kind of useless. Bear spray, depending on the wind conditions and all that. Yes,
Well, that is
true. What I did at that moment was wait for the cars, because after all, cars,
passing by. Do you make them leave?
no, so that they act as a shield for me. So actually the thing is, you put yourself behind,
The sleek car.
you wait for a car to pass because it's still not very frequent. You raise your hand and then the people in the shelter, they kind of know what's going on. So what they'll often
Do. You mean the guy isn't going to stay next to you and then speed up as you make your discovery attempts?
So what he'll do is actually he'll stop and then, in fact, we'll cross together. So he'll drive with me, go along with me, and then he'll just position himself between me and the bear so I can keep going straight ahead. Eventually, the more bears I started to see, the less I cared and the more I became desensitized to.
But for sleeping at night, because people always say, be careful at night, with the smells and all that stuff. How did you manage at night?
Yeah, so you see, at the start of the Trans-Canada in the Yukon in June, it's always daylight, so it never gets dark. Yes.
Because it's very, very beautiful indeed.
Then the further south you go, that's when it starts to get darker and darker. But at first my goal was to ride as long as possible because it's always daylight. And that would be to my advantage because I wouldn't have the cues of darkness that make me sleepy. In the end, I saw a lot of bears in the distance. Every time I saw them, I would yell and make noise. At first I waited for them to leave, but after that I would just cross and go quickly. It is what it is. The first time I got scared was at night. The first time it started to get dark while I was riding. Since it was always sunny in the Yukon, I could see clearly.
See, those aren't the same reference points.
That was almost 1,000 kilometers into the Trans-Canada. I was entering BC, in the north of BC, and then it was the first time it started to get dark around midnight. It was actually dark. And when it got dark that evening, I remember because it also started to rain. And I was paranoid because I couldn't see very far anymore. The only thing I started to see was all the nocturnal animals coming out, like porcupines and moose. And sometimes I would see bears coming out. So at that point, I was completely paranoid.
Wasn't there a bit of hallucination sometimes?
Definitely the lack of sleep too. And even then, when I stopped to pee, I was paranoid. It's like, am I being watched?
Yeah, you're all alone in the middle of nowhere. You have to realize there are vast stretches and you're all alone. I can totally understand, but driving like that for 2 months, wasn't there ever a point where you got tired of it? Was there ever a moment when you thought, that's enough, I've been driving for a month now? No,
never.
No, but I'm just asking you. The question is, at some point every day, even though you had that break with the bike, every day you're racking up the kilometers and you're always on alert. You see the animals, the nature, the nights wondering, am I safe? I'm all alone. There's no one around if something happens to me. At any point, did you ever feel weary, or on the contrary, did it actually become addictive?
Like I was saying earlier, the human body and even the mind adapt quickly. So even after a while, after a week, you realize that this is my lifestyle now. This is how I live. This is how every day in the foreseeable future is going to unfold. So we adapt. If I started to like it and it became normal for me to sleep only 3 hours a night or just 1 hour a night, my body functioned very well on just 1 hour of sleep. So, before, if we did that now, I would have a hard time. But like I was saying, the body adapts very quickly. You just have to let it happen and trust yourself.
But now, we've talked about before how you prepared for it and during. And this is a question I often ask on the podcast, but it's about the after. That is when you do an event like this with endorphins every day, where you're constantly amazed, you're moving, you're in motion from one point A to point B. Every day you meet new people, you wake up in the morning, you go to bed at night, you've had the chance to see hundreds of landscapes at every turn, and at some point it stops because you've reached your destination. And you go home, you get back to your life. Afterwards, was it mentally difficult for you? I wouldn't go so far as to say depression or not, but there is still an addictive side to it. When everything stops, there is definitely a feeling of withdrawal. How did you handle the aftermath, having spent 60 days, 2 months to cross the 12,000 kilometers of Canada?
Every first time, whatever we put ourselves through will always destabilize us. So, a first ultra, a first triathlon, a first return after a big adventure. So yes, coming back was difficult. But at the same time, what I understand now is that you just have to keep thinking about the next adventures.
You look ahead?
That's it. We look ahead. What's next? What's next now? What's next? Of course, we come back from a big adventure, but it's not the end. We keep on living. In other adventures, the adventures
Yes, of course. Philosophically, as you say, if we start from the idea that there's this adventure, but there are other adventures coming, inevitably you don't drop all the way down to the bottom of that sine wave, but you lighten it a bit and stay somewhat focused. What I understood from everything you told me is that you don't ride to perform or anything like that. You ride to truly discover, to experience emotions. And it seemed to me that I read in various interviews, there was this Trans-Canada, wasn't there also a Trans-America?
Yes.
And wasn't there a podium finish?
Yes.
So there you go.
Both, you see. Yes, behind everything I do, it's not purely for performance, it's for the numbers. Performance...
It's the risk because it has to happen.
That's it, exactly. Performance, as I say, if I do long distances in zone 2 every day, it just becomes normal for me. It's like breathing. And by breathing, by doing 500 kilometers, well, 500 kilometers is the equivalent of 100 kilometers for someone else.
Afterwards, actually, when you're used to it and at the level you're at today, for you, 500 kilometers, some people will say, oh, wow, 500 kilometers, that's huge, it scares me. But for you, 500 kilometers, you'll immediately know the average duration, how long it's going to take you to do it. So right away, you have a completely different perspective. But to get back to the Transamerica, it starts in Astoria. So Astoria, for people of my generation, that's the village from the Goonies. I'm just telling you this because I studied this route. At one point, I got interested in this race. And indeed, the start is in Astoria. It's the village from the Goonies, just to set the scene. And so you set off, it's about 6,000 kilometers.
Yes, 6,800.
Right, and so that was after the Trans-Canada.
Yes, the following year. So the Transcan was actually the training for the Trans Am. I already knew that beforehand.
The guy rides 12,000 kilometers to train for 6,000. Exceptional. And so you finish second. And here I was going to say on the scene, the North American ultra cycling scene, that's where you set the stage. Behind the curtain, he's there. He did the Trans-Canada, then the Trans-America next year, finishing second.
Third, actually.
Third. But still, that's quite a performance, considering the level. And there too, did you experience an adventure and emotion similar to the Trans-Canada the year before? Or were you a bit more focused on performance? And having also crossed the United States myself, the further east you go, the more urban it gets, right? Yes. How did you experience it? This Transamerica, it's a bit
of both. So yes, there was still the political aspect, the beautiful landscapes and seeing what I see and pushing myself beyond my limits. At the same time, knowing that there were other people in the race. So that's what was nice. I was always close to the other competitors. You know, there was me, actually, there was the leading trio. So it was me, Omar Difichet, and Pavel Polaski.
Two people who, by the way, have done the race across France, indeed. There are podium finishes. Omar won the race across France, and Pavel finished 7th or 8th, I think, in 2024.
Really big names. And I arrived at the Trans Am as a rookie. So nobody knew me outside of Quebec, even though I was covering pretty good distances in Quebec. Good times in Quebec, but outside of Quebec, I was seen more as someone poetic, someone more about adventure and not about performance. But it was actually kind of the opposite. Yes, I love adventure, but behind that, I also love going fast. I love pushing myself, and I love catching up to people. So during the Trans Am,
you switched off. You went into competition mode.
That's right. I showed up at the race and people didn't know me. And I knew that my strength for me being having a full-time job, so I often only had weekends to ride. That's why I ride on weekends. I ride fast so I can get back and work on Monday. That's kind of the joke. I love doing long distances, but I have to be back by Monday.
Morning. It reminds me, we have riders on RACE ACROSS France who tell us the same thing. I have to remember the Belgian riders, the first year in 2018 on RACE ACROSS France. David, he finished second. And I said to him, how's it going and all? Are you staying this weekend for the awards ceremony? He told me, no, actually, I hurried because I have to pick my apples. He was a farmer and he had apple trees. He had to harvest his apples. And he told me, no, actually, I pedaled fast because I have to go harvest my apples this weekend. So it makes me think of that. In any case, it's an encouraging message because it shows that you can have a very serious job. And from the moment you make the decision, but I think you're right, it's a matter of mindset. Am I capable? Yes. Do I make the decision? Yes or no? You decided to say yes to making that decision, and you see your projects through to the end. In any case, I saw you at RACE ACROSS Quebec because you took part last year in the 1,000 kilometers of RACE ACROSS Quebec. And it's true that when I decided to work on myself in Canada and therefore in Quebec with David and Jesse, we talked, and right away your name came up. That is Henri Do. You're a star of ultra cycling in Quebec, in Canada, that's for sure. And I watched you. And I actually discovered that you had a very interesting approach. Very how should I say, not show off at all, very introverted and with enormous resilience, because actually during this adventure, and you'll tell us about Quebec afterwards, how you experienced it, but you had some stomach issues. Even though you were second or third, I think, on the first loop. You had stomach issues, and a huge number of people would have given up. That is, they would have handed us the GPS saying, I have stomach problems, it's over. Well, no. Henri, in fact, he said, I'm going to stop. It will pass. It will pass. I'm going to stop. And when he arrived at that aid station in Terrebonne, he was third, if I remember correctly. You were in the top 5, I think. And he left again almost last or second to last. So he stopped for a very, very long time, but he started again. And so I followed his GPS and he finished. And honestly, since you're sitting across from me, I want to take this opportunity to say I tip my hat to you, because it's been 8 years now that Race Cross Series X has existed, that I've been observing. Well, what you did there, even though you didn't win, what you did really left an impression on me, because I thought to myself, that's the kind of values this guy has. Respect. You see, respect because you didn't give up. You could have quit, but you didn't. You pushed through. You pushed through, you weathered the storm, and that's exactly the mindset you've been describing from the very beginning. You weathered the storm, you found solutions, you finished, even if maybe you weren't in the best shape, sure, but you completed your 1,000 kilometers, and honestly, respect for that. So that's what I'm talking about here, is how I experienced it as the organizer. Now, I'll let you tell your story, your race at the Cross Quebec, after the Trans-Canada, after the Trans-America. So as you mentioned, there were also 24-hour races, there were Everesting challenges, and then this race at the Cross Quebec. So how did you experience it?
Yes. You see, it's just like you said, that's exactly it. The Cross Quebec race, the initial goal, yes, aside from the fact that it's a race to win, to finish in the top 3, to finish first. But after that, it's the adventure that comes back. That's what excites me the most about all of this. So the ultimate reason why I do it is for the adventure itself. And precisely during the Race Across Quebec, the difference we'll have in this event and not in solo adventures in solitude is that even if I'm alone in this race, I know that on the same route, on the same course, there are people ahead of me and a few hundred kilometers behind me. And if I keep moving forward, maybe eventually I'll catch up to them. And indeed, when I left the life base, I was the last one. But I caught up. I think I had a deficit compared to the next person ahead of me of maybe 100 kilometers, 150 kilometers, maybe, yes.
I was going to say 6 to 7
hours. Yes, 6 to 7 hours. But in the end, I caught up with maybe 10 people when I set off again after that. So for me, the thing now was, yes, I was the last one. It's not a big deal. The adventure is still
there. No, but in any case, you have all my respect. Honestly, it's mostly about your attitude.
Yes.
Where many would have used those problems and used that as an excuse to say, I'm quitting actually. I was, in fact, I arrived. Third, I wasn't playing to win. That's happened to me. On S-Cross France, I won't name the person out of respect for them because I have a lot of respect for them. And besides, they've performed well in the past. And on S-Cross France, it was someone who was coming back to challenge themselves after taking a break from their career. He told himself, I'm going to go up against the younger ones a bit. It started off very, very strong, I think beyond his limits. And then when he got to a life base, he was in the red and he told me, I'm stopping. I said to him, but why actually? You're ranked well. Why do you want to quit? No, he told me, I'm stopping. I know I'm not going to win, so I'm quitting. And I said to him, but think about the people who are following you, you know. Think about the people who are following you, the image you can project, the fact of seeing it through to the end, pushing your limits, telling the story of what happened to you. And I couldn't get this person to change their mind. Usually we refuse GPS devices. We manage to get people to change their minds. But this time, unfortunately, I couldn't get her to change her mind. She had come to win. She pushed herself to the limit, saw that she couldn't win and said, I'm stopping. That's why, since you're here in front of me, I want to take this opportunity to say congratulations, because in my 8 years of observing and organizing, it really made an impression on me. So you see, there are victories that have left a mark on me because the people who have won our events, I think of Pauline, I think of so many people. I won't start listing names because I might forget someone. I think of a lot of people. But what really struck me was the human side of things and performance. And here for you, the performance was being last, finishing third, ending up last again, not giving up. So hats off to you for that. And then coming to this episode, actually, to tell you the truth, I was running a bit late. There were some bus problems. Henri said to me, where are you? I'll come pick you up. So he picked me up at a bus stop and we talked on the way in the car. And he tells me, so he'll be on the TCR this year, he says, I've never ridden in Europe. So I'm thinking of everyone listening to us. If you watch Henri this summer on the Transcontinental, don't hesitate to give him some tips or send him a few messages on social media. Henri has never ridden in Europe. Does that stress you out? Does that worry you? How do you approach it? Because I can totally understand. Being European and the first times I came to ride on the American continent, you ask yourself a lot of questions. Even just in terms of the rules of the road, that's super important. So for you, the particularity is that on the TCR, you'll be crossing several countries with different road signs as well. But how do you feel about that just a few months before leaving?
Does it stress me out? Does it worry me? No, yes, and then no. Even now, I'm throwing myself into something I don't know yet, but I know that I'm able to adapt and I'm able to learn on the go. That's a bit of a strength I've developed over time, being able to learn, to evolve, and to perform really well in the moment. Even when I'm doing something I don't know how to do it. Right now, it's all about research. I'm going to do as much research as I can beforehand, especially about the entire route I want to ride. The potential resupply points I've found, how I'm going to adapt, how I'm going to manage. There won't be
shops.
Lax
convenience stores for Europeans, that's what we call them here. For the French, the dépanneurs we have in Quebec are like small convenience stores for us. They're like the little convenience stores you can find in France. They're not bakeries, it's different. They really are just small convenience stores. You won't have convenience stores to help you find your way. But as you said, I think you'll know how to find the resources. Are you approaching this event in competition mode or not at all? More to discover Europe, actually?
No, in competition mode. I do have a ranking I'd like to achieve already.
Can you tell us about it?
Similar to the Trans-Am.
Yeah,
for sure. It's very ambitious. It's
very ambitious, especially since the level is so high now.
Especially with, as you said, the level we have now. Now, over the years, because, well, anyway, if I compare myself to people from the Trans-Am who made it to the podium at the TCR, like Pavel a few years ago, it's just not the same level anymore. So it's even a bit more.
The level has gone up. Jonas, last year's winner of the 2500, will be there. The European phenomenon, the Frenchman Victor Bozzoni, who actually wins every race he enters, who was a young hopeful. A Frenchman who was on track to become a professional but was held back by illness. So he stepped away from his dream, which he is now fulfilling a few years later, notably through Rafa, whom he propelled this year. And it's going to be a really great race to follow. I hope that one day we'll have the chance to see him in a race across France.
Yes, definitely.
2,500 kilometers. It's going to be interesting. I have a question. What still drives you to keep riding like this? Every weekend, every year, taking on new challenges. What's your motivation? Well, of course, there's the discovery of beautiful landscapes, the sunsets. Do you have things to prove to yourself? Do you have things to prove to someone else? What's the reason? Deep down inside yourself, the
ultimate reason is that it's meditative. For me, it calms me down. I can think more clearly. And even with all my professional challenges at work, I find solutions when I'm pedaling. Whether it's for personal challenges, house-related challenges, or professional challenges, I find those answers while pedaling. And it opens my mind. It makes me change perspective too sometimes. And it brings everything I mentioned earlier.
Do you remember all the ideas you can have during a ride? Are you able to, like you said, it's meditative, so you think a lot. There might be decisions you make, choices you make during an adventure or a day of cycling. Do you remember them when you stop? I'm asking you this because in my experience, I can't remember. I can't retain more than 3 ideas. That is, sometimes I get home and I think, wait, I had a great idea. Oh, but shoot, I can't remember it anymore. Because I had 4, 5, 6 ideas and I can only remember 3. So I stop and I write them down on
log,
my iPhone. And are you able to remember everything? Looking back, your vibe?
Remember everything? No. But it's like you said, I document everything. So I write it down.
That's
true. Sometimes I write it down. Sometimes it's voice messages where I talk to myself, or sometimes I just type it out. Or sometimes it's several photos. And often, since I'm actually a very visual person, so I take a lot of photos and I can tell you exactly.
Return.
It brings me back, exactly. I take a photo and I remember exactly how I felt that day. The weather, how it was, how I felt physically and mentally too. I
can understand. And Henri, do you ever fear the moment when you won't feel like it anymore? I
don't think that's ever going to happen. I think that for everyone, as humans, sometimes we get fed up, we get really sick of it, and we just want to have an off season and not do it anymore. So yes, that's definitely a lack of motivation, and that's normal. but I think it's just human to sometimes lack motivation.
Have you ever experienced that drop in motivation to ride?
All the time. Yes, especially when it's really, really cold. And I ask myself, why am I riding at minus 40 degrees, at minus 30 degrees? What's the point? Earlier you said I was looking for a storm, but that's actually not true. Every time I ride, I hope the weather will be nice. But often it's the opposite that happens. It doesn't
get cold. It doesn't get cold anyway.
For New York, I didn't expect it to snow or rain or for there to be freezing rain. I was expecting the weather to be nice. That was the plan initially, but in the end, it was the opposite.
And do you train indoors?
No, not anymore.
So you really do all your training? At least that's what I noticed from following you on social media. You can really tell that the cold doesn't stop you. And the cold here isn't like the cold in France. It's not 5 degrees. It gets down to minus 15, minus 20. And people always say that when it rains, you need the right clothing. When you ride in minus 15, do you use heated gear for your feet or do you go without? Because honestly, even at minus 5, minus 10, it stings. Minus 15, minus 20. And when you're riding, you feel it even more. It's harsh. So what about you? What are your gear secrets for riding in really cold weather?
You see, I'm still adapting. So I keep evolving my system, modifying it, tweaking it. It's like nutrition. You see, nutrition changes all the time. And especially as we get older, what we like to eat, what we can eat changes. It's the same for everything, including gear. The gear, if it's minus 20, minus 25 degrees, those are two completely different things. So there will be minus 20 and minus 25 degrees. Minus 25 dry, minus 25 rainy. Minus 10 with rainy as well. That's two
different situations. Depending on the weather, you know exactly which fabric, how many layers to wear.
Exactly? No, but I have an idea. I have a rough idea. And after that, I adjust. And in the end, if what I chose is, if it's not enough, that's when I'll stop, or else I'll adjust with whatever I can find along the way. You just have to be creative and resourceful with what you have. And that's pretty much how it is with everything we do in life. Being creative and resourceful. Here are the cards.
That you have, I agree with you. With the number of kilometers you've traveled, have you... I'm going to turn the question I wanted to ask you around. Which roads in Quebec have you not ridden on? Actually,
yes.
Are there any regions? Because Quebec is very big. In France, it's not just a region or a French department. It's as big as France, maybe even bigger than France. So are there still regions you haven't covered yet and that you'd like to cover?
The only place actually in Quebec that I haven't ridden yet is north of Mont-Laurier, so towards James Bay, towards Lake Teby. That's really the only area so far where I haven't taken out my bike yet. But eventually, yes, I'd like to fill in a little bit. It's like when you check the heat maps on Strava or on mapping apps, to have a red line on all the routes in Quebec.
Sometimes you look, plus you take a lot of photos. I know that on Google, there's an option. You can have a map of everywhere you've taken photos. Do you ever zoom out and think, oh yeah, I've actually done quite a lot, but I'd like to go there. I'd like to go there. What is it that has kept you from ever going to Europe?
I think it's a lack of time. There are so many things I'd like to do, so many things. I have so many goals, I have so many hobbies and passions besides cycling too. So it's really the lack of time and the fact that I'm still working full time, so we don't have unlimited vacation days. So you have to choose what you want to do. And I told myself, I'm going to do this step by step. I'm going to start with Quebec, Canada, North America, and then after that, Europe. So the conquest continues this year in Europe.
What is it? Your other passions, Aurélie?
I also do 3D printing. A lot of development, actually, programming. I do home automation with websites, software, all that. I started doing woodworking.
So in a sense, your daily job is your true passion.
Yeah. Indirectly, yeah.
So when you say home automation, does that mean you're crazy about data? You're crazy about data? You're crazy about geolocation? How do you...
In terms of optics, actually, to be more optimal, to be more efficient, and to be more automated. Now, with all the smart homes, this...
Which is smart bulb.
My lock, my cameras, all of that, I'll be able to automate everything like that. If I come home by bike, it knows that.
10 minutes before it needs to start heating, it opens the shutters. Basically, yeah, everything is automated. Or what tip could you give to people listening to us who would like to embark on an adventure like you did over thousands of kilometers, but who have never really dared using the excuse, I have a full-time job? You are a perfect example to say, I have a full-time job, a very serious one, and look, see everything I've accomplished. So what message could you share at the end of this episode?
You have to take a chance. You have to give yourself the chance to take a chance.
I love that expression.
You have to take a chance. Once you try something, that's when you realize it's possible. But to be able to get there, you have to give yourself the chance to try. And when you give yourself the chance, you allow yourself to try something that you thought was impossible. That's when you realize, oh, well, in the end, it was possible. What else is possible? And in the end, it just opens up a Pandora's box where anything is possible. And the challenges we set for ourselves and keep taking on after that, we realize that in the end, what was limiting me was myself, not other people. Other people will often tell us no. We shouldn't impose other people's opinions on ourselves. We just have to do what we love, do what we want to try to do. And we shouldn't hold ourselves back because of fear or because of what people impose on themselves.
I don't think I could have ended with a better message, one that I completely agree with. A big thank you. A big thank you, Henri, for sharing this with us. Is there anything you'd like to add, or do you feel we've covered all your achievements and adventures?
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming.
It was a real pleasure to be here.
It's really cool.
That's right. Trust yourselves. That's the only message I have. That's
why I started. I checked in the meantime. Quebec is 3 times the size of France. There you go, just to give you an idea of the area. 3 times the size of France. Anyway, thank you. Thank you, Henri. I invite you to follow Henri on social media. So on Instagram, it's Henki, Henki.
That's right.
And then there's something we can't share because that's something you just can't share. It's olfactory. Since the beginning, I don't know if you can smell these little hints of cinnamon. Since the beginning, because I stopped by to pick some up from my friend Loic, who is a Frenchman now turned Canadian since he has dual citizenship, who took the plunge and created Daddy Roll in Montreal. I stopped by and said, here you go, during today's episodes. I'm recording 3 episodes. We'll be able to taste this. We'll leave you now. I'll see you very soon for a new episode of the Ultra Talk podcast. And as for us, we're going to wrap things up quietly. And we're going to taste these famous rolls from Daddy Roll in different flavors. And now it's time to treat ourselves. A big thank you in any case.
Thank you very much indeed.